These are hard-working men and women who work very hard throughout the cold of winter and the heat of summer. We're very proud of the work that they do. They're in jeopardy of losing their status with LiUNA, in jeopardy of losing their benefits, in jeopardy of losing their pensions. All of you know that to pass a bill in government takes time. Why is it that all of a sudden it's introduced last week and they want to ram it through right away? Doesn't that sound suspicious? It is suspicious. Why now, in 48 years, is the government interfering in labor relations favoring one group over another?
They are passing legislation to amend the Labor Relations Act to take a collective agreement that we have bargained since 1970 that is province-wide in scope across Ontario, and they are taking that agreement and by legislation they are voiding it. Our members who perform carpentry in that sector will no longer have the protection of a collective agreement. That affects people's pensions, it affects their benefit plans, it affects their wages, it affects their right to have job security and union representation if there's an issue with their employer.
Back in the 1970s, under the provincial Conservative government, they introduced a number of pieces of legislation that became law that we call the designation orders. So different trades had different jurisdiction, and it was delineated very clearly within these designation orders. So carpenters could do carpenters' work, electricians would do electricians' work, etc. And so there were a number of exceptions to this rule. For example, in 1970, there was parallel jurisdiction created, for example, between the cement finishers and LiUNA, where LiUNA was permitted under these orders to represent workers that do cement finishing, and so did the Cement Finishers Union was also permitted to represent workers. Parallel. So this was a fair compromise at that time, knowing that it would be very difficult to hand over jurisdiction to one particular local union. So they were very fair at that time and said, we're going to be fair to both international unions and give you the same jurisdiction. In 1978, there was an exemption also made to the high-rise forming sector, which exempted a number of areas from representing only carpenters in the forming sector and actually allowed LiUNA to go out and organize the forming sector. So we did. Like usual, the largest construction union in the country, which LiUNA is, went out, rolled up its sleeves, used our resources, used our strength, and we went out and organized the high-rise sector. So why has, for the first time in 40 years, Queen's Park decided to interfere in jurisdictional matters that are usually settled at the Ontario Labour Relations Board? It's an interesting question. When you have a union of 120,000 members who have established jurisdiction over 40 years, and you take their jurisdiction and you hand it over to another union, it doesn't look well, it smells funny, and it smells of favoritism, political favoritism to another organization for whatever reason, and I don't know what that reason could be. So what's really going on here? When legislation is introduced in a secretive way, when legislation is introduced in a budget instead of a piece of legislation that can go through hearings, that can go through a democratic process, when the industry, when our contractors, when contractors that are in contractual relations with LiUNA can have an opportunity to sit and debate and talk to the government about what's good for the industry. How come that hasn't happened? How come there haven't been hearings taking place where the operating engineers, iron workers, sheet metal workers, cement finishers, and other trades in the construction industry have had an opportunity to address these issues as well? No one has. In the ICI sector, there are a number of areas where we did represent all of the high-rise forming members. In London area in particular, where we have over 600 members, for example, 600 members that work in that sector. which now, because of this pending legislation, they're in jeopardy of losing their status with LiUNA, in jeopardy of losing their benefits, in jeopardy of losing their pensions, because the government, in an ill-thought piece of legislation, is saying that only the carpenters can represent these farm workers in that sector, in that area. Well, that's a good question. Because when it comes to losing your membership and having to move to another union, it should be a matter of choice. But keep in mind that this bill does not give choice. This bill is very restrictive, and it's telling workers where they have to go. And so if you're a member of LiUNA, let's use London as an example, and you're one of those 600 members that have been there for 25 years, and all of a sudden you have to go to the Carpenters Union in this particular situation. You have pension benefits that have accumulated over 25 years. So all of a sudden, those pension benefits, those contributions are going to stop. And you're going to start brand new contributions at a completely different pension plan. That's pretty bad. If the government really did care about these families, would they be forcing them to do this? Probably not.
I think we need to take this a step further. It also is going to affect the way LiUNA contributes to the communities, to these charitable organizations that the government does not sponsor. And you know what, it's pretty sad that they didn't give it the thought. A further thought, I'd evaluate, is this just going to affect laborers out there? No, it affects a lot of groups of people that unfortunately cannot afford to do a lot of things because the government are not there for them. And organizations like LiUNA are there every day for them.
What we're telling our members is, hold still. First of all, this is not law yet, number one. Okay? Number two, we are going to protect their jurisdiction at all costs. And there is many ways to do that, and we're going to fight. So the message we want to send to the Liberal Party of Ontario, and in particular to Premier Kathleen Wynne, if you truly believe that you represent working people, and if you truly care about working families in this province, you will reconsider Schedule 14 in the budget, in Bill 31, remove it and give an opportunity for the democratic process to take place and have everybody have an opportunity to have input into the industry problem, if there one really exists. I'm going to finish right there and tell you that this is one of the most regressive bills that we have seen in 40 years of labor legislation. Not only the way it's been presented, but the way it's been rammed through, and the level of favoritism that's been shown here, we haven't seen in 40 years. Thank you.